G'day everybody, how are you going today? It is so good to see you. Well, right now we're in a little bit of a frenzy of camera releases, and I suppose this makes sense. The powers that be have perhaps decided that the worst of C19 is over. Who knows? Who knows what the truth is there? It might not actually be the case, but the powers that be have decided and things are being released. Their schedules are many years in the making, so they can't put stuff on hold forever. And what's happening? Well, Canon has made massive announcements with the R5 and the R6. Sony have formally announced that they're about to make an announcement within the next week. And it is strongly rumoured that Nikon will also be making some announcements, perhaps within the next 24 to 48 hours. So there is a lot to talk about. And it's exciting because it means the camera industry still has a pulse. And we all have to be joyful that the camera industry still has a beating heart, regardless of what brand is your brand. I think we all benefit from there being more than one company working hard to keep us happy. So it's very exciting. Now today I want to talk about Sony and what I think it means. What does the A7S III mean? And I think it's really exciting because it means something different to the Canon R5 and the Canon R6. It fits in a different place, and it fits in that place very, very well. If the specs are true, Sony have knocked this particular camera out of the park. And they've knocked it out of the park for a different demographic, a clearly, completely different demographic, clearly a different use case for what the R5 and what the R6 are for. And if we are to believe the Nikon Z6S and Z7S rumours, all of these cameras fit in slightly different places. They're all fabulous, they're all competent, they all do 4K, they all take photos at high res. Well, not the A7S, and that's what we're going to talk about. But they all have their place. And I think this is super exciting because what it means is you can work out what sort of photographer slash videographer, if that's the case, that you are, and then you choose a camera and a camera system based on your use case. Let's talk about the Sony A7S III. Here it is finally. Well, look, I think the most powerful statement that Sony is making with the A7S III is 12 megapixels. Now, one of the best cameras I've ever owned, and I say this time and time again on my channel, was the Nikon D3. It was an extraordinary 12 megapixel 35mm camera. And what I said to people who were perhaps, say, in the Canon space, they go, oh, geez, there's not many pixels. And I said, it may not be as many pixels as you've got in your 5D Mark II or whatever was going on at that point in time, but these are the best pixels that you will ever see. And I feel that this is the case with the A7S III. These may well be the best pixels that we've ever seen in a 35mm detachable lens camera. And many would say, why 12 megapixels? And there's two reasons. One, those 12 megapixels as a stills camera will allow for ridiculously high ISOs still having low noise. So for certain use cases, whether it's astrophotography or whether it's even surveillance, and I know that sounds weird, but there are lots of surveillance agencies out there in the world, and it was certainly talked about with the Nikon D5 that law enforcement were using those cameras because of the ridiculously high ISOs. And the other reason is 4K video. What does it mean when you have 12 megapixels? It means you don't line skip, you don't pixel bin, there's no overhead for the camera to have to do that processing. You are literally reading pixel for pixel and you are getting extraordinarily good 4K. And it also means in 4K video, the same high ISO capabilities apply. Along with that, with all that extra processing freed up, you can also then do things like 10.2.2 RAW internal, which is certainly part of the Rumoured specs. You can do things like 120 frames per second with no recording limits. That is certainly part of the specs. Rumoured specs. So clearly this is a camera aimed at niche photography and aimed at videography. But if you want high ISO photography or you want the best 4K in the 35mm hybrid space, right now, based on the Rumoured specs, this camera is looking like the place to be in this category, because there's obviously higher end video cameras and there's cropped sensor, Blackmagic cameras, things like that. Sony found an audience with the A7S II. People loved it, people worked with it, people understood it. The rumoured price is $3,500 US, which basically brings it in just a little tiny bit below the R5. But what we can see here is the Sony and the Canon are completely different cameras. The Canon is clearly aimed at still photographers because its still photography specs are high, 20 frames per second at 45 megapixels, completely different to the 12 that is rumoured for the Sony. Now the Sony might be able to shoot that 12 at 100 frames per second, who knows? So it'll have another use case. But these cameras are completely different use cases. And I think it's fantastic to see them both in the market. Let's talk about some of the other specs. Sony are saying that they have a new passive cooling system that will allow this camera to run in all its different modes, whether it's shooting RAW, whether it's shooting 120 FPS 4K without overheating. And it won't have time limits on the recording. This is a big deal. But perhaps one of the biggest deals, which we are yet to see, but I think there's a good chance of it, is that by creating a new sensor, which might be a stacked sensor, and it only being 12 megapixels, and not having to do pixel binning or everything else, it means the data comes off fast. So there is a very, very good chance that this will completely remove rolling shutter. And I think that's a big announcement if they've done it. If they can manage to get 4K footage at 24, 25, 30 frames per second and no rolling shutter, I think that would be a big advancement. And for people interested in video to be able to get such a competent 4K 120 FPS camera for $3,500 US, I think they'd be pretty excited. Let's have a quick look at some of the other specs. So that sensor, that 12 megapixel sensor, again, it allows for other interesting things besides rolling shutter. It includes an alleged 15 stops of dynamic range. And as a filmmaker and a photographer, that is very exciting. It's also rumoured to have almost 500,000 ISO of almost 500,000, which again is what we were talking about before. That's ridiculously high. And 16-bit RAW output. So again, that means the color depth of your files are very, very good. This is an exciting camera. It's made to be extraordinarily high quality within a narrow niche, which is video and only up to 12 megapixels of stills. Now, of course, there's some tricks that can be employed to increase those megapixels. Whether Sony will add that sort of technology into this camera or not, I don't know, when they have the 60 megapixel A7R IV yet to be seen. This is an exciting time, and how does this sit up against the Canon? Well, I think it clearly is a different camera. It's clearly aimed at a different market. It is more niche than the Canon, and it will do some of the things the Canon can do as well, but it will do them better for longer without overheating, like 4K video at 120 FPS. But here's the thing. The people that buy the Canon might not use that very often, or they might just work around it, or they might even buy two bodies. if I was in that space, that is how I would get around it. I would simply buy two bodies to deal with the overheating if I wanted to shoot a lot of 8K or 4K 120 FPS. Whereas this camera, you don't have to worry about that. So again, you've just got to look at your use case. Do you want a camera that you maybe need two of if you want video as well, but you want 45 megapixels? Or do you want the Sony because you're really just going to focus mainly on video? And I don't know, you've got a Sony A7R III or a Sony A7 III or a Sony A7R IV for stills. So you're just happy to basically have two Sony bodies doing completely different things. And that is a very valid approach. Of course, a 12 megapixel camera with a cooling system means that it can do allegedly up to a bit rate of something like 600 megabits. That's high quality. So I'm so excited to see this rumoured A7S III. I suspect at this point, as the release is very, very soon, the formal release, these specs are probably pretty solid. Fingers crossed, you never know, could be wrong. But if true, exciting times, great news for people who have invested in the E-mount. And I look forward to talking about this very much again when it actually arrives. All right, everybody, as usual, it has been so good to see you. And if this is your first time here, I would love to see you again. So please subscribe, please share, please like, and I look forward to seeing you very soon because there is a lot going on at the moment. And I've got some exciting news to share in the next couple of videos. All right, see ya.